Hello, and welcome back to the Audible Finish, a weekly show discussing the week gone by in the world of wrestling. And what a week of wrestling we've had. I'm your host, Dimitri Carlos, and alongside me, as always, is my esteemed co-host, Thanasi. Welcome, Thanasi.
Thank you for having me. This is going to be an absolutely tasty one.
Well, in this week's episode, we review one of the most historic moments in WWE and, frankly, professional wrestling history, and that is the return of none other than CM Punk at Survivor Series WarGames. We will unpack everything regarding Punk and Survivor Series WarGames, including Punk's Raw promo in just a few moments. Later on, we'll also talk about what happened over with Punk's former employers, AEW, including the announcement of Adam Copeland versus Christian Cage for the TNT Championship next week in Montreal. If you are enjoying the podcast and have a moment, please like, share, and subscribe. Without further ado, let's get straight into the most talked about thing in wrestling, and that is CM Punk back in the World Wrestling Entertainment. WWE made a big point of showcasing the fan reaction across the globe to Punk's return at Survivor Series. So before we go in depth in it, I thought it's only fitting that we share our initial reaction in hearing and the music and seeing it live.
Would you
So
like me to go first?
I think you should go first because to add context, I was actually getting ready to leave the house. So I was alarmed and noted about Punk's return by the sheer decibels that was piercing the rooms between where I was getting ready and where you were watching Thanasi.
I was reacting. Well, essentially, let me just recap exactly what was happening. So, War Games came to a finish, and we will obviously recap War Games as we will later on in the show. But as War Games was finishing, I was looking at how satisfied with the whole pay-per-view that I was, and I was heading towards the fridge to go and give myself some yogurt. And I happened to look up at the clock, and Sydney time, the time was 10 to 3. And all I could think was, this is fantastic. We've just seen the signature hit, just a 2 hour and 50-minute pay-per-view. This was absolutely fabulous. They've given us everything. And while I'm there scooping in my yogurt, like Pavlov's dog, my mind instantly, the second that I hear the static, I don't even need to hear Living Color say, look in my eyes. I know from the static what has happened. And I instantly screamed, oh my God, no effing way. Ran up to the television where the pay-per-view was just where I thought the pay-per-view was about to end. And I just keep screaming, jumping up and down like a crazed toddler. This was an absolutely insane moment. They worked me, they worked everyone because we did not expect this to happen. And with the fabulously performed Randy Orton return angle, they really did their absolute best to make us think that there will be no Punk at all. So to pull it out this way, just like they did, interrupt to interrupt Kingdom by Downstate and just go straight into the static and the new 2023 version of Cult of Personality, the new re-record, the second re-record by Living Color, was just an absolutely brilliant moment for me. And of course, my screaming alerted you, who was getting ready for a party in the other room.
Yes, indeed. And I remember I was getting ready, and the moment I heard you say, oh my God, I thought to myself, there's only one possible reason that you would react this way. And I knew that it was something that, and it made me, I'm not going to lie, about 40 minutes late for the party, but I didn't care. And I came in to watch it, to enjoy it, and it was only 2 minutes, really, of him popping up. But my God, what a 2 minutes! And it goes to show a lot can happen in 2 minutes.
Oh yes, very much so.
Yeah. So the brief recount. Obviously, you're bringing it up. The baby faces won. The logo popped up in the corner. The famed logo, the Triple H logo, popped up in the corner, and then the surprise. And after the broadcast, and this is leading into a bit of one of our discussion points. Rollins was apparently getting very animated and very angry with the Punk return, sort of cussing at him and having to be held back by quite a few officials, including people like Michael Cole. Whether Michael Cole actually has the strength to stop a rampant
That was
Roland
impressive.
is another question. But uh, the do you think the debut was, and the return rather, not the debut, was handled correctly?
Well, I think that before we say how handled correctly, we have to say how was it handled at all?
Well, okay, let's not change it from handled, but rather, was it everything you hoped it would be?
Well, I think it was done in the perfect way possible, and that is the frankly, AEW took it a different way, which is another type of perfect. AEW took it as it's going to leak whatever we do, so let's play it as the worst kept secret in wrestling. I'm talking about August 2021. WWE actually managed to do it in the original perfect way, the not even 2020s version, which was even in the age of social media, in the age of speculation, no one really thought that it was going to happen because it was all pure speculation. There were no rumors going around. All the dirt sheets were actually saying, no, it's not happening. And if the reports are right, he only signed on the dotted line day of. So it was almost kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy in as much as everyone wanted it so bad. And it just goes to show, like, you want something bad enough, perhaps it really will happen. So I think that as far as that goes, it was handled absolutely perfectly. I could not have asked for something better. To do it at the end of a big four pay-per-view, a fantastic pay-per-view, mind you, as well. It's not like you're sitting there saying to yourself that you're feeling a bit deflated. Like everyone had really expelled all their energy in the reaction, especially that massive RKO.
Oh,
So to give that moment on top of everything and still to evoke that amazing reaction, I think that that was done perfectly.
and let's not deny that it was perfect location for it as well. I think
Mm.
great timing in that sense, and it was wonderful. CM Punk has had like 3 or 4 huge pop-worthy returns and debuts in like the last 2 years, which is quite impressive. And I think I always thought after AEW that him coming to WWE was a lot more likely than I ever thought possible. But I
Mhm.
certainly didn't think it would happen within the same year that that he was heading up their Collision show
Yeah.
and going to Wembley. So it's quite remarkable, I think. Were there any reservations or concerns you had or questions you had with Punk before going into the Raw return?
Well, I think immediately I did have some reactions as soon as just by the mere presence of him on the roster, and before we even hear him speak, the fact that he's signed, it begs a lot of these questions. Like you see Seth Rollins' reaction, right? Which we were asking, was it shoot? Was it a work? Now, WWE did this perfectly, where his reaction was not on official WWE social media. That was everything that we've seen is through fan footage because he was cussing, he was swearing, had to be pulled back by commentary. It wasn't referee or talent that were doing it to make it sell. So I think from that perspective, they made it look as shooty as possible. However, let's accept that that was a work. The reaction of a member of the roster to a massive signing, just like this, is not a new trope, right? Because you sign someone massive, essentially the question is, are they going to take my spot in the main event? Are they going to take my opportunities at becoming world champion? It happened to the NWO in 2002, where the roster said, look, essentially, we spent the last, well, less than 10 years, but the last 6 or so years trying to destroy these people. Now they're going to come in. No, it's not accepted, right? I suppose there isn't a kind of war mentality between WWE and AEW because we saw that when Cody came, he was embraced with open arms. However, I would liken this more to a whole bringing in a part-timer to take our spot.
Hmm.
Now, we don't even know if Punk is part-time, right? That's still a question mark. But the thing is, there are so many great candidates to become the next world champions. Like you look at Cody is supposed to be finishing the story at WrestleMania against Roman for the undisputed world title. I would envision that the right person to take the strap off of Seth Rollins would be Damian Priest. We've been looking at the elevation of Sami Zayn into main event talent, and he needs to become world champion. Jey Uso has made his elevation to the world title scene. We had even Drew McIntyre, right? He stormed out of Survivor Series, and this one is one where it's unclear about if it's a shoot or if it's a work, to see just how pissed off he is. So, even as well, at the Royal Rumble, right? We could be thinking that Punk's going to win the Royal Rumble. Gunther, until a few days ago, was the favorite in that one. So essentially, like, we're looking at all these genuine main event talent that have become main event talent of their caliber in the last year or so, basically since the arrival of Triple H at the helm. So bringing in someone that is on the level of CM Punk, yes, it always begs the question of, is Punk going to be is going to be placed right at the top of the card? But also, is it going to come at the expense of these other main event talent? And I think these are the question marks that come out of just the signing of CM Punk.
Okay, well, let's move on to his first promo back in in the company, which in itself raised a lot of different questions. And I just want to briefly discuss the sort of lines that he was saying. I'm not going to lie, I've watched this segment back like 4 or 5 different times. One as just a pure fan, a couple times for the purposes of this show, and then again, just as a fan. But he starts off with the line, "Looks like hell froze over." And this was something that Triple H alluded to in social media, the post that he put up with Punk, which I don't think anyone ever thought they'd ever see those two willingly in the same photo again. So this is quite impressive.
To be honest, with the lighting at the back behind them, you could almost believe that it was a photoshopped photo if you look at it, because they kind of look out of place with the reflection. So it's almost as if the camera itself knows this isn't supposed to be happening.
And I just want to quickly give a shout out. Someone pointed out this is continuing Punk's love affair with Bret Hart references. This was the same line Bret Hart used when he came back in 2010. So I thought, it's nice, but it feels as appropriate here as it did then. So it's not a Bret Hart reference just for the sake of it. He says that he has 2 words really to describe his feelings and emotions after Saturday, and he's scared of how true those words actually are.
It's not "suck it" and it's not "guns up" either.
No, it's not. He says an American dream, which I think we all know who he's referencing there, taught him that as long as you speak from the heart, you can't go wrong because it's the truth. And for him, the truth is, I'm home. So we'll get onto that point a little bit later, but he's playing up the home aspect. He says, "This is where I belong." I think that much is true, actually, because he's one of the biggest wrestlers in the world to be in the biggest company. I guess that there is an argument to be made that this is the place he should be. He showed his pride with the fans, saying the voiceless found their voice and that he loves them. And then he says, "a wise man," which, again, there is one person going under the moniker wise man these days, told him that to get everything out of this place, he would need to leave it and come back. He says, "I'm back for you, the people, because you are home." Behind the camera and on it, it's been nothing but love. He even alludes to that's not exactly true. And he says as well, since people asking, that AJ is fabulous, sends her regards. That got, I think, probably the biggest pop actually of this promo. And then he says again, everyone's happy to see me. Well, almost everybody. And he says he thinks that some people are afraid because they know that the best in the world has come back, and that he's going to be testing them. And he makes a line here that says they're afraid that they're going to have to come to terms that their best efforts to be the best in the world, in this ring, on this microphone, even at commentary, is not just false, but it's a lie, because the best in the world is back, and his name is, and he allows the crowd to chant CM Punk. And he concludes the broadcast, not on the mic, but just saying to the camera, "I'm back. I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to make money." So I think a lot of people are saying it was a safe promo, which I think is fair, but I mean, we have so many weeks ahead for him to say other things, to get into items. We don't need him to come out and deliver a piper bomb on AEW. That's not what is necessary. And something that people are forgetting is that that is the most interesting news of the last 2 years. But him being in WWE at all is 10 years in the making. And he had his own issues with that company that are more interesting to address, actually, at some point, if he chooses to do so. But I wanted to ask, how did the promo land for you? How does it sit when you compare it to the AEW debut and first promo? Because I think they were trying to achieve very different things.
Certainly, certainly. I think when you described it as a safe promo, I genuinely agree with that, right? Because we did not get the direction, right? We said, he said, I'm not here to make friends, I'm here to make money. So that's kind of a reference, I suppose, to the locker room. And that's one of the things that I kind of like, I think about is that how much of, if any, of the locker room knew that he was going to debut at the end of Survivor Series. And also this speaks to, I guess, a practical question or a logistical question of modern wrestling. If you do want to have a massive surprise like this, as they did, should the roster be clued in or should they be kept out of the loop for fear of leakage? Now, professionally speaking, if you trust your staff enough to have them as your talent, you trust them enough with these secrets, right? So that's in principle. In practice, we know that doesn't actually work. However, I think that if the roster did not know about this, or at least the ones that were going to be in the ring for it did not know about this, it would have been a massive failure logistically, because the heat would have fallen on Punk as the one that was the cause of this, even though the call should have been management or Paul Levesque, Triple H. I think based on Seth's reaction, we knew at least he was expecting to see Punk, because the world champion does not react like that. Like if that was his reaction, it would have been an unprofessional reaction, right? So I think he at least knew, and therefore I conjecture that everyone else in the ring knew as well. So that's my question on, that's my point about him on the roster. As far as though delivering a safe promo, it makes me wonder, is that because we don't know what the program is going to be? Is Punk going to be a full-timer? Is he going to be a part-timer? And if so, when's he going to appear again? Because we didn't hear him say, I'm here week in, week out, which is something that he actually had said when he debuted with AEW, essentially implying, yeah, I'm going to be a full-time talent. Full-time talent does not mean you are literally there every week, but it also doesn't mean that you're going to be coming in for specific programs like a Brock Lesnar kind of deal or a Roman Reigns kind of deal. And I think what that plays into is potentially, I don't know, he is an injury-prone wrestler. So maybe they're trying to physically protect him by not having him on the road all the time if he's going to be a part-timer. There's also the hypocrisy of it, because he made a point about The Rock winning the world title. Do you have views on this particular point, Dimitri?
I think it's for the same reason with guys like Edge and Lesnar and Cena and Roman these days. I wouldn't be surprised if he comes back and wrestles a fairly full-time schedule, but I also wouldn't be surprised if they try to protect him, because WWE likes to preserve the star status and the attraction appeal of their main guys' appearances. So I think either way it works, because we either get a lot of Punk in a way, and Punk's never really been a guy that cared about just being the special attraction on every so often. He was a guy that cared about being in the back and actually being invested in everything going on in the company. I think we're yet to see, but the cool thing is that with WWE, they can have Punk give his promo, and you're still excited to see what the next thing with Punk's going to be, because you don't know everything yet. The thing I liked with the AEW thing is that it felt incredibly pure, and coming out of that AEW promo, you knew exactly what his direction and his focus was, so you were excited for it, but you didn't have any new questions except for when is he going to face this person or that. Here, we still don't know, and I think that's a deliberate ploy from WWE.
And I think, look, as far as, because CM Punk, when he came back to AEW or to wrestling by debuting in AEW, he did make a point about just spitting some truths and speaking from the heart about what this meant to him. And I think we didn't really get that from this particular promo. But I think what will be a good opportunity for him to do that, if they so wish, is on a Stone Cold podcast. That would be a good opportunity to have that raw discussion, still allow it to be filtered because you're filming it, but with a lot of anticipation going into that. Whereas this one was hotly anticipated, but there wasn't a lot that came out of it aside from him saying, "I'm home."
Well, let's wrap up the Punk discussion on his appearances with the question about this home, because that's arguably the one thing he said that is to be from the heart and is the truth. He says he is home. Now, on the surface, a lot of people find that hypocritical. I don't necessarily disagree with that side, but I do want to point out a couple things. One, Punk was with WWE from 2005 to 2014. And that is considerably longer than he spent at any other wrestling promotion. So he's spent most of his career and most of his stardom with that company. So there's a lot to be said that he has a lot of pride and a lot of time and investment that he did have with WWE. The second thing I wanted to bring up is home, and I know in this sense they probably mean it in a very warm sense, but home isn't necessarily the place that you just feel the most comfortable, but it's the place that has your roots and the place that you feel the most connected to and that you have to go back to at some point. And I think for Punk, I don't think he even thought he needed that before he got back into wrestling. But I think once he did, he probably did think at some point, oh, actually, I would like to go to WWE and sort of, make myself clean, absolve myself of all this negativity and these thoughts that I have. The same way that Bret Hart did it, the same way Bruno Sammartino did it, and any other Ultimate Warrior, all these wrestlers that have had issues with the company. At some point, I think you do just want to get yourself and rid all the angst and all the negativity you have associated with it.
Yeah, I think as far as, because there's a lot of forward-looking stuff that we can say about Punk, but exactly on your point about, coming home, that's a backward-looking perspective. And I think that that's exactly what that comment meant, because home is not always brilliant. Like we like to, we say that, the people that you love are your home, or that your home is this warm and fuzzy thing. You and I both know that your home is not always the best place for you, right? Your home can become a very dark place, very painful place, but it's exactly like you say, it's your origin. And a lot of people want to revisit that home if they've gone through that kind of pain, to bring it full circle, to seek that catharsis. And we know that Punk left that home with a hell of a lot of pain, both physical, emotional, spiritual, grammatical, as Captain Jack would say. So I think him coming back does represent that attempt to just bring it all back, and clean that up, have that internal sense of cleanliness, of his conscience.
I only want to bring up one more point about Punk, and we could easily do an hour on this. So in the comments, if you actually would like us to do like a huge deep dive into it, we'd be more than happy to.
Yeah,
we've got the time, as Punk would say. But I do want to bring up this final point, which was that on Wednesday afternoon for us Aussies, maybe Wednesday in the morning internationally, news broke from Fightful that Bryan Danielson headed up the 3-person disciplinary committee that ultimately fired CM Punk. And this was along with AEW General Counsel Chris Peck and an outside attorney. And Danielson on his X or Twitter platform said this line, which people are interpreting as referencing this decision that he ultimately had to make with the other two, which is, "My dad always told me the right thing is often the hardest thing to do. It won't always make the most money. It won't always be the most popular, but it's still the right thing." That's it. What are your thoughts on this revelation and the timing of it as well?
Look, Bryan Danielson, in his comment, is 1,000% right. Okay. And I don't say that just because what he said is not just perhaps what he heard from his father, but it sounds like something Albus Dumbledore said, right? Like the time comes when we have to make a choice between what is right and what is easy. Those two are not the same thing. And I think that Bryan Danielson, he made a call not in his personal capacity, but he was very conscious that by being on this disciplinary panel, you got to look at the facts objectively, and you got to make a call because you're dealing with essentially legal personnel, one internal, one external. So I think from that perspective, yes, the news breaking obviously coincides because everyone's starting to scratch around to see, CM Punk news. Fightful's trying to expose as much as they can just to kind of get that clout there. I understand that. I appreciate that. I do wonder what effect that would have on their personal relationship because I know they have a hell of a lot of respect for each other. And I don't think that in his personal capacity, Bryan Danielson would have wanted to see Punk go away because of their relationship. But certainly to have, of everyone on the roster, to put him in that position, it was the most appropriate place or the most appropriate choice from all your talent, right? Because he's the one that everyone can actually agree, almost like a Jesus kind of way. It's like, this one's perfect, right? Like, we're not going to, like, with
The
Chris
irony
Jericho,
of that, by the way, the irony of the Jesus figure being Bryan instead of the Bucks, instead of Jericho.
I know, but you put an Omega there, instantly you say bias. You put Jericho there, instantly you say bias. You put even Tony Khan himself, he will fall on an owner, on a business owner. So to put a talent and to put Bryan Danielson there, I understand and I actually agree with their choice to put him on that panel.
And to be fair, I think Tony Khan, he acted on the advice, but he still made the decision.
Oh, of course.
So we say here Bryan got Punk fired. I think it's fair to say that Khan fired Punk.
Yep.
And he would probably use the argument Punk fired Punk. So
yeah, well, look, I think it's fair to say that Tony Khan has officially defecated himself as soon as that news broke. That I don't know if he was watching Survivor Series himself, but when your formerly marquee talent has just jumped ship to the market leader and you're trying to compete with the market leader, it's just a massive demoralization.
Well, all people that hate AEW or wanted to see Punk go back to WWE now have two people to thank eternally, and that is firstly Jungle Boy for Jack Perry for actually instigating the final incident. And secondly, Tony Khan, because, and I saw this in a meme, which I thought was very hilarious, which is Tony Khan somehow managed to bridge one of the biggest beefs in professional wrestling history. So
it is amazing what spite will do, right? Like you can all. I think it's very easy to believe that what drew Punk towards WWE or towards mending that bridge or mending that fence was to make a point to AEW that yes, I am as massive as we always believed I was.
Well, Thanasi, that's a lot on Punk. We can certainly get into it more in future videos, but let's now move on to the rest of the content. And let's briefly discuss SmackDown before we get into Survivor Series, which in itself was already a stacked and engaging premium live event. So were there any discussion points you wanted to raise from SmackDown?
Look, I think without doing like a full recap of the show, there were a couple of things that I did want to bring up. One was that the big talking point and the big story that was woven throughout SmackDown was this idea of, will Becky Lynch and Charlotte Flair, given their animosity in the past, be able to coexist as team members? And I'll just go through some of the segments here that they were involved in. I mean, the show opened up and it was very hot for Bianca Belair, right, when the baby faces were cutting a promo ahead of WarGames. And I love the fact that it had the cage at the top as well because they were in the same venue. But Bayley came out and she set up that tag team main event between the frenemies, like I said, Becky and Charlotte, and two members of Damage Control, which we were later to learn would be Bayley herself and Asuka. And when it came to their main event contest, that was the real story that was coming through. Like, can they do it? And frankly, my comment is that this is a very common trope when it comes to these big Survivor Series style matches or even these friends and enemies storylines. And we saw it in AEW as well. Kenny and Jericho had something similar. But yeah, as soon as I saw that in trying to protect the pinfall, Charlotte inadvertently speared Asuka onto Becky, who was getting the cover on Bayley, I was like, okay, this miscommunication is going to lead to Bayley winning, which she did. She rolled up Becky. She didn't even, hit a finisher or anything. So just by leaving that question of the coherence of the baby faces for the pay-per-view, it just kind of concluded for me that, yeah, the baby faces are going to win because they've lost on the night before the pay-per-view. I did have another quick talking point, but did you have any comments on that, Dimitri, before we go on?
No extra comments, but we'll obviously get into what happened at the match. But it seems that will they be able to coexist?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we ended up finding that was the case, so slightly predictable.
Yeah.
But I'll just go through this very briefly as well. On the Grayson Waller effect, we had a bit of a throwback to DX days when we saw Austin Theory impersonate Kevin Owens. But before he could even try to perform the voice, we saw that Kevin Owens came out kind of like a, what the hell is going on here? Exasperation almost, not anger. And he's back from his suspension, but he's also followed by LA Knight. So while the heels were trying to coordinate their simultaneous punches on the baby faces, the faces just smacked both of the heels. They threw the plants out from the Grayson Waller effect set. This ended up leading to a tag match, which the baby faces won. They got some good reactions from the Stunner and from the BFT, but it made me wonder now, because neither LA Knight nor Kevin Owens would appear on Survivor Series, and we knew that. It just begged the question of where are they going to go with these two main event caliber wrestlers now? That's even more in question with now the return of CM Punk, although I think he's going to be more focused on Raw anyway. But it's kind of like with the absence of Roman, with the absence of another champion in Logan Paul, these are basically like your two massive baby faces, LA Knight and Kevin Owens. And it just doesn't seem like there's a lot of direction there because they're paired up with very much mid-card level talent in Austin Theory and Grayson Waller. But that's just my view on that one. There's just a couple of things that were coming out of SmackDown for me.
Hopefully, Logan makes a return soon and drops the title quite quickly so that we can have at least something that's drawing the focus of the rest of the male roster. All right, well, on that note, Thanasi, we've been dilly-dallying about it, but we had a massive pay-per-view, and that was Survivor Series WarGames. So let's get into our review of it. The first match was the women's WarGames match, and that was between Bianca Belair, Charlotte Flair, Shotzi, and Becky Lynch against Damage Control. Obviously, these matches are filled with heaps going through it, so I'm not going to try and even remotely recap everything, but I will talk about some highlights. For example, Io Sky's spot off the top of the cage, where she put the rubbish bin or the garbage can over herself and did the dive. That was great. Charlotte Flair's moonsault off the top wasn't as great, but it was still impressive. The mist that was countered with the fire extinguisher by Bianca Belair, I thought was a nice, smooth transition. And this is something I do want to highlight as well. Bayley was taking shots for people. She took the spear for Kairi Sane, trying to, I think, do the Sami Zayn of trying to get herself, in the good books of everyone within the faction. Becky manhandle slammed Bayley through a table for the eventual win. So the babyfaces won, as you suggested, predicted based on what happened on SmackDown. I actually predicted it outright, so yes. Good for me. But I do want to say some talking points. Firstly, I thought most of the spots and the match went very smoothly for the most part, which I thought was quite good and is a testament to the talent when there's so many bodies in the ring at the one time. To be able to manage that is quite impressive. What were your thoughts on this opening match?
Look, I think as a match, exactly like you said, all the spots were really well thought out. I also liked, I don't think you referenced it, but I liked the one where the heels chained together Becky and Bianca to deliver like a quadruple drop kick. I thought that was a nice spot, showing that, that team uniformity there. And I mean, how can you not love the pop that Asuka got when after every entrant came out, the crowd were chanting table, table, table when they reached underneath the ring. And it was only when Asuka eventually did pull out the table that she got a pop out of the Chicago crowd. Um, Look, overall, this was a really successful match. Um, the thing is with War Games, because when you introduce a new match type, you do experience diminishing marginal returns. So essentially, it means that you're going to have a table spot because that's what happened when they brought it back in 2017. You're going to have a big spot off the top of the cage because that's what they brought back when they did in 2017 and they took the roof off essentially. So as long as you can have a good story going in, which they did have the story, right, where Becky and Charlotte did hug it out, essentially, taking a leaf out of Bailey's book. So it did show that they could coexist. Doesn't matter whether that they've made amends in real life or not, their characters have. But overall, I was very, very happy with the way that this match went. Really, really successful opening bout, really successful women's war game match.
Before we get into the next match, there was a huge return, and arguably, well, for some would argue the biggest return. I would. Did you hear about R-Truth, Thanasi? He's back in Ruffles form.
In Ruffles form, yeah, during the segment where they were doing the advertising. That doesn't get much more WWE than that.
He's back with the chips.
Yeah.
And later on, he was back with some sort of rolls, jelly rolls.
And we called it actually because the chips were sponsoring the opening match. And it was through a fan vote sponsored by this chip company that they were going to decide who gets the War Games advantage. It ended up being the baby faces. And it doesn't work in War Games. You need to have heels getting the advantage just for the story of it.
All right, let's get into the next match of the card, and that was Gunter versus The Miz for the Intercontinental Championship. Some points I wanted to point out here. Firstly, did you notice Gunter did not get as many chops into this match as he would normally do, which I think was probably a deliberate decision. But I thought that was interesting just going into it. The Miz actually kicked out of a powerbomb, which I thought surprising, impressive. In the match, Gunter's knee was sort of copping a lot of damage, one of his knees. And the biggest false finish of the match was when The Miz hit his kneecap, gave him a low blow behind the ref's vision, and they followed it up with a skull-crushing finale, and this gave him a 2. And then eventually the match finished. There was a splash to the back of The Miz by Gunter. And then the Boston Crab eventually transitioned into the Lion Tamer for the win. I thought this was a good, serviceable match, kind of what I expected from the pairing. And I think based on Raw, it seems like they're not done either. But I think, a solid bout, and I think a good way to follow after a War Games match. Same sort of thoughts?
Yeah, I think I also got those vibes that it was a very, very good match, but it didn't feel like it was the end because Gunther doesn't usually win by submission. So when you have this kind of alternative method of victory, it does make you say, oh, okay, nice, great. Lion Tamer is always fantastic. I've put you in it many times. You know how much it hurts. But I think that there will be a follow-up match. And like you said, as we'll hear from Raw, it does seem as if we're going to have them going toe-to-toe once more.
What I'm about to say is not a slight against the quality of the wrestlers, but given that we have a much more marquee match to discuss, I'm going to throw to you, Thanasi, to sort of briefly take us through the Dragon Lee Santos Escobar match and also the Women's World Championship match. What did you have any notes or thoughts that you wanted to bring about those two?
Oh, look, I'll recap them quickly. If you have used, feel free to interrupt me, but I'm just going to go through these ones. So, like you said, Dragon Lee had stepped in for Carlito to fight against Santos Escobar. Santos in the early stages tried to injure Dragon's leg by smashing it in the steel steps, but Lee does break out, but that was a reference, of course, to the way that he injured Rey Mysterio. And Lee ends up hitting a Hurricane Rana off the apron onto the floor. In response, Santos delivers a huge top rope Frankensteiner. So they're exchanging very much a lucha libre style form of combat. Lee hits an impressive deadlift sit-out powerbomb, showing exactly how strong he was. And in the finish, Santos hits a vicious Mexican, not Canadian, destroyer. and immediately follows up with the Phantom Driver for the clean, albeit smug and heelish, but very clean victory against Dragon Lee. So that'll give him some momentum now heading into his heel run. As far as the women's world title match, Rhea was channeling her inner Shawn Michaels because she was wearing arseless chaps. Not something we usually see from her attire, but definitely fits in with her gimmick.
Did it make you question anything about yourself, Vanessa? About your
I think more the fact that I associate Shawn Michaels with arseless chaps tells you all you need to know about how I feel about the attire, and I just think about it in a very specific way. There is a superplex spot that I think got botched, and they both seemed fine afterwards, but it wasn't clear who took the damage in kayfabe because they both just kind of tumbled. So I think that botch did kind of rattle them a bit. Zoe Stark did build some momentum when she countered Riptide and then mounted a comeback from there, but she couldn't quite nail her Z360 or Z360. Rhea ended up powering out with a headbutt and successfully delivered the Riptide that she previously tried to hit. And this, of course, gave Mummy the expected title retention. But that's the recap for those two. Shall we head into the big one?
Let's do it. It's now time to discuss the men's WarGames match. This was between Cody Rhodes, Seth Rollins, Jey Uso, Sami Zayn, and Randy Orton versus the Judgment Day and Drew McIntyre. So this was very much a match of storytelling, as you brought up before, one of the things that's powerful about WarGames when you can achieve it. So there were a couple stories. One was, can Damian Priest deal with McIntyre, who is kind of a loaded gun? Will Randy Orton show up? That was the other one that they were building up during the night. Will he actually turn up? And then obviously, can Cody and Seth also make sure that they're chill? That one was the smaller story because they were sort of okay with it as things were going on. But I wanted to talk. So obviously the match was very anticipated, and there were a couple of spots worth mentioning. That firstly, before Randy came in, when it was time for him to come in, we got the spot where Rhea actually ran out and was going to give the briefcase. And I just thought logistically, we were wondering this ourselves last week when we speculated. Logistically, had the cash-in succeeded, what exactly would have happened? Would it have been a free-for-all for anyone in the match to get a pin? Or would they have all separated and just watched Damian Priest pin Rollins?
That's a really good question. I think as far as the kayfabe or in kayfabe, the plan would have been for essentially the bell to ring again to say it's a world title match, Priest to get the pin very quickly and to end it very quickly as well. I think that was their aim. However, at least from a sporting element, we've only seen a cash-in be applied during a match once before, and essentially what the consequence was that the referee said this person cashing in now joins this world title match. So it means that, exactly like you said, does that mean that whichever member of Judgment Day pinned Seth Rollins would then become world champion in the end? Like, very, very complicated. And you could tell that it wasn't going to lead to anything, because when you've got that sporting level of confusion, the only thing that is going to happen is, well, kayfabe's going to resolve it. We're going to have the entrance of Randy Orton.
Which was genius in my mind, because they already announced his return, but in prolonging it so long, I think it heightened the pop, which was good. And I think it helped be a swerve for a lot of people that were speculating without any concrete information, but speculating Punk would indeed return. I think this was a good way of navigating that issue. And the best thing I can say is that Randy's return was so good that I don't think it even needed Punk. By that point, I think fans were satisfied.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with you. They went about Randy's return in a perfect way as well, and he looked in great shape.
I was about to say, I wrote in here, Randy Orton comes out, he is looking good.
He was looking bloody ripped.
It was insane. from him coming in, it sort of just changed the tide, and it was just the baby faces. So they
Yeah.
all got to hit simultaneous rope hung DDTs on their respective opponents. There was an RKO on Dominic Mysterio. Randy, let Jay know that he hasn't forgotten just yet, just as a bit of an aside. So another story that was being played there. Sammy and Seth Rollins climbed up to the top of the cage to chuck JD McDonough off for Randy to RKO him, which again is probably the spot of the match. I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, and I reckon that's going to be up there. It's not going to be ahead of Evan Bourne and Seth Rollins as RKOs, but when they create these compilation videos of like the best RKOs, it's definitely going to be up there.
Yeah. And the match finished with Randy graciously giving Priest to Cody to finish off, and he hit Crossroads for the win. And that wrapped up the WarGames match. Another, I think, fairly solid bout.
And I think exactly on that finish, even though in any with any other competitor, like, and I'm saying with any other competitor than Cody Rhodes being in the match, Randy Orton would have been the right one to get that pin, and it would have been, right after that spot with JD McDonough. However, like we said before, like story is everything. With Cody Rhodes being in that match, honoring the memory of Dusty and being the one to get that final pinfall and win that match, I think that was the most appropriate thing to happen. I guess the only thing that could have been even slightly better if Cody put Damian Priest in the figure 4 leg lock, which is how Dusty Rhodes has won WarGames matches in the past. But yeah, overall, that was the right story way to finish. So exactly like we were saying, that story was everything here. And can I just allude to a couple more spots that I did want to say here? One was, I really liked seeing Damian Priest hit those senton bombs onto, I think it was both Jey Uso and Seth Rollins. I think that was really nice to see that side of his athleticism, because he's usually more of a brawler. And then Sammy Devon Dudley Zayn, he popped the crowd when he brought the table in, and he even helped Jay hit 3D on Drew when Drew came in. So he obviously was another standout of the match. The bull rope that Cody brought in kind of like manifested it out of nowhere. That was a bit of a shock. But yeah, overall, really, really satisfied with the way that this match went. Even though like the table spot felt kind of even tokenistic, right? When Seth went through courtesy of a Razor's Edge, that was almost like we've had a table here, so we might as well put it through. But it didn't feel like it really nested with the story all too much.
It didn't need it,
Yeah,
but we got it.
We got it, and it was a fantastic match, fantastic in all.
And I think all in all, any premium live event pay-per-view that can be kept under 3 hours, I'm on board for.
100% agree with you. And especially, mind you, this was a big 4, so I was expecting it to go until 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. Sydney time, but very, very satisfied with a 3-hour pay-per-view. It's the exact perfect, I think, timing for a national level pay-per-view.
Well, the last thing to wrap up is the predictions. So me backing the babyfaces really paid off, which I didn't think would work out so well. But yeah, I won 5-3, that being the only difference between the two of us. So I guess good for me, I guess.
Well done.
All right, let's now do a quick recap of Raw. Now, we already discussed the main highlight from Raw, in my opinion, which was CM Punk's promo. But I do want to quickly give a shout out to Randy Orton, who opened the show with a great return and a very simple promo himself. But he wants payback with the Judgment, with the Bloodline. But in the meantime, he's set up to go up against the Judgment Day. So basically, Randy's got some factions to deal with moving forward. Drew looks like he's not really done with Seth yet. And we know Jay's going to have a title opportunity next week, which really pissed off Drew. And he delivered a bloody Glasgow kiss onto Seth Rollins, which I thought, wow, that's cool. And the other thing as well, we have Cody Rhodes announcing his Royal Rumble entry, and also the reveal from Shinsuke Nakamura that Cody is his next rival. And it gives him a brilliant missed job for my money to help set up that feud, which I think will take Cody through to at least the Rumble, if not maybe even Elimination Chamber, hopefully setting him up perfectly for when he does have to face Roman for the titles. Were there any other moments you wanted to talk about Raw, Thanasi, or the things you wanted to raise about those points?
I have two comments. One is Shinsuke's a good opponent for Cody if he's going to be in the Royal Rumble, because it means that these guys don't necessarily have to have a singles match on pay-per-view. They can just have a moment in the Rumble and then a TV match on Raw as kind of like the feud kind of culminating, and then segue right into the Elimination Chamber, because Shinsuke's someone you can put into the chamber as well. And I think the rumors are that Cody's going to be in the chamber and win. But just another comment. Have you ever noticed that Drew McIntyre with his current look, he kind of reminds one of Alec Baldwin's character from Madagascar 2, the lion, with kind of like that slicked back hair. I don't know, you should have a Google of it when we finish the recording, and tell me what you think.
Okay. It's a bit out there.
I know it's a bit out of the left field.
And on that very weird note, let's now move on to AEW.
Very strange, very weird Christmas.
So we'll move on to AEW, and we'll start with the latest episode of Collision. So Thanasi, do you want to take us through your talking points of Collision?
So my talking points are kind of produced out of, well, there's one talking point that comes out of two matches. So this is all about the Continental Classic. It's the Blue League or the Blue Group. So Claudio Castagnoli took on Danny Garcia in a group stage match. Garcia was actually quite tough. He kicked out of a pop-up powerbomb, a pop-up uppercut, but did fall short to the powerbomb. So Claudio did end up taking the 3 points in the Blue Group. And then in the main event, this was actually really shocking for me, because Brody King versus Eddie Kingston, the result was Brody won. So they initially started off trying to outpower each other. They were using shoulder tackles, chop exchanges. In the closing stages, Eddie hit 3 different types of suplexes. Brody hit a pile driver. They both just kept pushing through. But in the end, the difference maker was a gut-wrench powerbomb that gave King the win. And he pinned the champion. And that's what's important here, because what I initially understood when Eddie Kingston decided to
Put his titles on the line.
Put his titles on the line, he said, I'm going to put them up against, I'm going to put them up in every match.
Yeah.
And they did not announce Brody King as the new champion on either of these points. So essentially, the way that I think they're going to work it is that Eddie Kingston is recognized as the champion up until the moment that the new, or that the winner of the Continental Classic is declared. Yeah. And if he doesn't make the final, then should his reign even be continuing between the last group stage match and the knockout stage, which is the final? So overall, I did have that kind of question mark surrounding that. But overall, look, Collision was okay. And there's another talking point that I wanted to go on to. But did you have a comment on where the Continental Classic Blue Group went this past weekend?
All I had was the exact same question you had, which is I interpreted the Eddie Kingston stuff the exact same way you did. And so in the aftermath of it, I am a bit like, are we backtracking, or did we just misinterpret, or did Eddie Kingston perhaps not explain it the right way that they meant for it?
Like, did AEW perhaps not even think it through, really? It was just kind of like, let's just go out on a whim and see what happens.
Yeah.
In any case, as far as future plans, this other segment did beg some future plan questions for me as well. And it was the first match under the new name for Killswitch, the former Luchasaurus. It was a squash handicap match against the boys, Dalton Castle's boys. He hit a choke slam on the ring apron. That was vicious, but also the vicious lariat to the back of the neck is what got him the W. And he kept attacking them after the match until Adam Copeland made the save with a steel chair and a concerto. And all I wanted to do was kind of like explore with you, Dimitri, the direction of Adam Copeland, because my reaction as soon as I saw this segment was, can we just get him in a singles match already? Like, all I want is to see Adam Copeland in singles in a major, like, pay-per-view level match, like in a singles program. He's capable of doing it. It's going to be fantastic. So let's just go ahead and do it. And I think if I watched Dynamite correctly this afternoon, that we are going to get that. Isn't that right?
Let's move on to Dynamite because that is my first discussion point.
Perfect
So,
segue, right?
perfect segue. Couldn't have scripted it better. So I wanted to talk about the Christian Cage Adam Copeland stuff. So Christian asks him to come out, and after a few minutes, Adam Copeland finally does. So it was a bit like, oh, what's going on here? What's going on here? And Christian said, we're not going to make it to Montreal next week for the match that he requested because he is sorry. And essentially what happened here is Christian Cage realized, crap, he's taken out my backup. I know. I'm going to say all the things he said when he came back and hope that he agrees. So essentially he wants to, band the team together again. He calls him, he says that we're family. I'm your brother. I love you. He goes, I know that everyone knows that you didn't have a father figure. And he's like, no, I'm not going to go any further. Said, let's team again for your mother. Let's team again for Judy, the Jude Meister. And then when Copeland's turned around, that's when he grabs the title, tries to hit him with it, but Copeland, knowing this was company coming, punts him in the balls instead, says, nice try. And essentially he'll see him at Montreal and also go F yourself. And this one, from my stream, it didn't get bleeped. Now, obviously, we don't watch the TV stream, so maybe it was, but from the stream I saw, they just played it outright, which I thought was shocking.
I was watching an American stream for this one, and what I ended up finding was that after, like, with several seconds delay, that the crowd instantly kind of became less clear. So it's almost as if they hit the bleep button very late. And then the commentary team as well said, oh, we're back online, as if there was like a technical difficulty that had occurred. So no, exactly, like my stream as well. I don't know, did you watch an Australian stream or an American stream?
I watched, I believe it was an American stream, but I
Okay.
didn't know if it was like the fight or the broadcast or what exactly was going on. I think it
Yeah.
was just the American broadcast, but
Yeah.
that I actually think it made the moment more powerful.
Of course.
Like, look, we obviously don't support having expletives all the time, but every so often, a couple 50-year-old guys having a bit of beef, let them share a word or two.
I think to the extent that the channel allows them, I personally don't have an issue with expletives. It's just to the point of like, how far do you take it to make it meaningful? Because if they're dropping F bombs and C bombs and S bombs week after week, then it loses its impact. It doesn't sound like anything. But certainly compared to "I'm going to kick your butt," which is something we hear far too often
Oh yeah.
from both WWE and AEW. I think I liked the impact of this one because it was a callback to the previous promo when he came back after his debut at Wrestle Dream.
Exactly. So I'm excited for this match, and I'm curious because it is in Montreal. Are we going to see some sort of a screw job finish or a breakdown of some kind? Who knows? But
Neither of these guys is French Canadian, so I wonder which one will be the babyface here.
I mean, it will be hilarious if in his first major program singles match that Christian actually gets the pop. I don't see that. No, we love Copeland. Come on.
Yeah.
The second highlight I wanted to bring up was the MJF stuff. Basically, he came out and he praised Samoa Joe for his legacy in wrestling, which I thought, fair play. It's true. And he said, but December 30th is not about your legacy. It's about mine. And so very much he's setting it up as that it means more for him to win this match because it represents something, a big milestone for him. And then, the lights go out. The Devil's goons, hired goons, if you will, turn up to sort of instigate a beatdown on MJF, but Joe actually interrupts and backs them off. And then some text appears on the screen asking the pair to face an unknown tag team next week. And it concluded with the text, "Are you a hero, Max?" So with this in mind, I'm glad they're furthering the tease for the Devil. Obviously, we're yet to see who it is. I think it's fair to say now it's not CM Punk, as some of us were fantasizing. But I'm still very much excited about this proposition, and hopefully they save the reveal until after World's End.
Look, I think I was half expecting for them to make the reveal on this episode of Dynamite as a response to WWE's major signing, as if to say, okay, like, since you guys are going to do something massive, we're going to do something massive in response.
Yeah.
Not that I think that would, well, not that I have an opinion on whether or not that was the best idea, but that was just kind of like what I was half expecting.
It definitely wasn't the best idea though, because that would come across as you are flustered. Whereas
It'd be
now
very
that,
reactive.
yeah. Whereas this still looks like, no, we have our own plan. And that's always the best way to go about it.
That's right. But yeah, exactly on your point about the about MJF talking up Joe and saying, because a lot of people will remember Joe from Ring of Honor as like the original days. But because MJF, he's only a couple of years older than me, his first sight of Samoa Joe was in TNA, as he said, which is where I and you first saw Joe's work. And my God, I actually thought that it was 2009 TNA because they're going to be wrestling against masked wrestlers. It's like SmackDown versus Raw 2009.
Oh my God, what a game.
What a game, but also like that's the exact storyline where they had like the
Yeah.
masked man. Um, so overall, I think that was my big reflection. But also, why was Samoa Joe almost in like a friendly way saying Max like step back, like holding him back from responding to the masked guys? Like it felt very much kind of like a mate holding him back, like Steve, hold me back.
You know what? I get what you mean. I interpret it in a different way. My interpretation was, Max, do not book me in matches that I don't agree to type attitude. So
See, I thought that that's what he should say. It's like as if like, I'm not going to join you if that's what you
yeah,
want to do. But the
yeah.
thing is, like Joe's MO is he needs to protect MJF to get the best out of him. This is for their World's End match, is what I mean, for their
Yeah.
world title match.
Basically, Joe doesn't want there to be a cop out, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Which is fair enough. But a sufficient build, I think, and we've got heaps of weeks ahead of us now, so we'll see how they progress. I did want to just briefly just mention the results from the Continental Classic tournament in the Gold League. So Moxley beat Lethal to go to 6 points, leaving Lethal on 0. Rouge beat Mark Briscoe to get his first 3 points of the tournament. Briscoe still on 0. And Swerve Strickland surprisingly beat Jay White with a bit of a roll-up pin to go to 6 points to Jay White's 3. So if we hadn't had to discuss Punk, I would have said, let's do a bit of a deep dive into what we think about the Continental Classic tournament, the format, and how it's being structured and working. But that's something we can leave for another week. We've got plenty of time to work on that.
Yeah.
And
Likewise, I would love for us to break down the Continental Classic a bit more because I'd certainly have a lot of views on it.
And those were my highlights from Dynamite. Was there anything else, Nancy, you wanted to shed a light on?
That's it. I think it's been an absolutely packed week of wrestling.
It certainly has. That brings us to the end of a very stacked edition of the Audible Finish. Next week, we will be reviewing the match between Adam Copeland and Christian Cage, and notably, we will, in the anticipation that we get more CM Punk WWE programming, we will certainly be talking about that. Heaps more to be looking into, so be sure to tune in next week. Thanasi, great to have your company as always.
It's been great to chat CM Punk with you.
And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Until next time, we hope everything you do is just too sweet.